Well, hello, and thank you very much to the moderator. I am Jean-Baptiste Mirogo. I work for ISOC. I'm going to do this presentation in representing the MANRS presentation. Would like to apologize because the slides are in English. That's the language in which they were prepared. In the context, what do I want to say here today is that internet is a very large network, connecting 73,000 odd networks. They're all interconnected. They have their ASN to identify themselves. And we talked about how to protect resources so that users are safe online. We considered how to work on how to secure the DNS side. And what I want to do today is to consider more the protocol that is used by interconnected routers, and that's the BGP protocol. So the Border Gateway Protocol. It makes it possible for networks to exchange and to know which route to use to go from A to B. And this protocol is used for internet routing, as Serge was saying. The BGP, this is the BGP part that we're looking at. We're not talking about security application of the systems. We're looking at the protocol itself, the BGP protocol, which in itself, in the way it's designed, doesn't enable you to do verifications when information is sent. And in itself, in the way it's designed, can enable any network to send information, even though the origin of information may not be authentic. As Boris was saying, IPPs can hijack IP addresses and prefixes. So we want to see in what way we can prevent some networks from interfere and from stealing other networks or information. So here is a summary of the types of incidents that happened in real life, in the past few years in internet, and it's to show you how important it is to consider protecting the protocol used by all routers for networks. So there are three types of issues. You've got three examples, and we'll look at these three types of problems. The first case was what we call a route leak. So it was, in a sense, rerouted. When you have, if you have a company, you might have several providers. And when you have several providers in one way or another, you can define your policy, but it might happen that someone makes a mistake and makes a mistake with supplier, and the data going in one way ends up rerouted elsewhere. And that happened before. In 2019, for instance, it affected Verizon in the United States. They ended accepting routes that were not correct. And it has had an impact, redirecting traffic for Cloudflare, Facebook, and Amazon. And when you know what heavyweight we're talking about, it's interesting and worrying to think that traffic could be going the wrong way. The second type of issue is what Boris mentioned briefly, is the type of situation when operator X in Congo, for instance, finds itself seeing its addresses used by operator Y in Burkina Faso or in South Africa or in Morocco. This type of issue has consequences. It happened in 2008. YouTube got trapped, and it meant that services were unavailable. It had a significant impact in terms of image, but also financial losses. The third type of issue is IP address spoofing. It's slightly different from the previous two types of issues. It's when someone can announce traffic claiming IP packets that are not authentic. So you're using somebody else's blog to attack another company. So when the matter is investigated, investigations go to the legitimate owner of the packet where they had nothing to do with the attack. And that can create many issues. And in March 2008, this type of illicit behavior affected 13 terabytes from memcached, and that was reported by Akamai. So that's significant. There was an attack perpetrated by somebody who used a third-party network, who quite often is not unaware. So there are significant consequences. These are the type of problems that happened, as you've seen. So we need to consider how this can be addressed. Here's an illustration of three types of issues. So here's the hijacked route. And the fake Google that you can see is hijacking the traffic. It can happen, and it can happen regularly. The other type of issue is that when someone gives you the impression of offering you a shortcut, a better route, well, in fact, you're lured into a sort of dark web or black hole. You've got a few headlines here flagging this type of problem. Problems that happen on internet. That meant that Amazon was unavailable for 3 hours, and they lost about $235,000 because of this loss of service for 3 hours. You can imagine, drawing a parallel with a body handling identity cards, for instance. Information ending elsewhere in China, in Africa, or elsewhere. And it could mean that at the moment of signing an important contract, loss of service, that could be very significant and very problematic. And it undermines a company and affects finances. And this is not going away. This type of issues is going to continue unless we adopt strategies to protect ourselves. So here, there are a few points on the impact of routing security to protect online privacy. So in the three types of issues you see on screen, with a criminal impersonating you or hijacking traffic, and you've got the MITM They can spy on what you're doing, on what you're sending. They can modify what you're working on. Imagine that you're transferring money. Well, it could be hijacked towards a website that is not your banking website. They can see the content of they can see your credentials, your username and sign on. They can collect this data and they can then use it to buy something you didn't want or just to use your account. There's also, without verification, they can simply spy on you, have information. It's as if someone was spying on you without you knowing it. That person would know everything about you and you're not aware of it. Imagine if in 10 or 15 years or even 5 years that someone had this possibility. The other option is sending data the wrong way, so to the wrong destination, to a malicious actor. And the last situation is when there's a modification of the source address. So we've seen that this spoofing type of attack and the issues that it can create. Now, how to address these issues or how to tackle these type of problems? Well, there is an initiative called MANRS. Its aim is to improve security of routing it's aimed at being much more available for the type of problems we've seen, and it's relying on collaboration of all stakeholders. It's not in the hands of one person. So it means that if I'm responsible for a network in Congo, if there's somebody responsible for a network in DRC, if we want to improve traffic, we will each have something to do. We will have to work together to secure traffic, to make sure that it's in conformity, in line with what we want. So norms have to be defined. And we'll see at how it can be set up and why it's worth embracing. A reminder, MANRS is based on 4 pillars, depending on the type and quality or origin of members. So the first group is the network operator group. It's been in existence since 2014. Currently, there's 765 members and representing about 950 ASNs. Interconnection here for networks is on the basis of ASN numbers, and we get these through Africa. This is the only place where you can get an ASN. As I said, it has to be teamwork. So network operators do their share, but we know as well that there's an aggregation of networks and IXPs. So MANRS in its initiative will also intervene in IXPs. We've got 108 IXPs on board that have tried to apply the MANRS principles to contribute to improve internet security across the world. Additionally, we have another group, the content delivery network or content providers. That includes Google, Facebook, all the content providers, the likes of TikTok as well. As you know, the big content providers are limited in number. There's also a MANRS approach which aims at looking with network equipment vendors so that they can get on board and make sure that tomorrow's equipments are already compliant. And that could mean interesting future developments in partnership with these equipment vendors and developers. They can pilot the equipment, and constructors could commit to building in control mechanisms, and that would save time. And at the moment, we have 6 major constructors on board. To sum things up, MANRS boils down to 6 key points that you see on the screen. First of all, there's a filtering process. It's necessary when you're managing equipment connected to internet. You have to ensure that you only claim what is yours to claim, what you own. So only ever announce what you own. And if you're going to interact with someone, you need to make sure that what they announce, they legitimately can use and share. So if you have clients, you need to know these clients, they have a form of identity. That's the first filter side. So if everyone implements that, there'll be less illegal traffic. Then we talked about spoofing and the issue with spoofing. Another aspect of MANRS is to ensure that for networks that are connected to you, that your end users, you need to make sure that they don't deploy mechanisms where they are usurping addresses of platforms to sort of go through the cracks of your network. Then, as I mentioned, coordination is important to make sure that we can inform you and let you know when your network is attacked or when your traffic is being rerouted or hijacked. So we need to be able to contact you, and it means not having to ask about to see, you know anybody in this country or that country. So having a unique platform up to date with the information on operational centers, contacts, policies, and it means that it's very easy for anybody who wants to get in contact in relation to routing can find the information there. Then there's a part where you need to publish your routing data. Boris mentioned it. If you're committing to internet communication, there's a number of information you need to disclose. So that is part of the plan. And then there's a number of tools that we put at your disposal to learn how to manipulate objects. And the last point is talking about the matter to get as many network operators on board. Now, for the fine details, we're revisiting in more detail these pillars. And we're coming back here to the definition of MANRS, the definition of the different elements. We've covered that. Now, regarding security tools for routing security, there's a number of tools within MANRS, which is kind of like a way to check the identity card for your country and to check the level of compliance, the proportion of actions implemented. There's also a number of databases that interconnect to do that internationally. And also ensuring that when entities join MANRS, the validation can be done faster. It accelerates the process. Here you've got a screenshot of the MANRS Observatory, and it gives you an idea of the level of implementation in terms of coordination, etc. This is another screenshot. And if we're looking at the African region, you've got the level of implementation for the different points. And you can see that in terms of RPKI, there's more to be done, but it gives you an idea of how much the combined strategies are applied. And that contributes to the quality and security of internet. So I'll skip through these. And all the people who have subscribed and joined the MANRS approach have monthly updates, and there's regular checks to make sure that all our members are compliant, that their networks are following the MANRS model. And this graph shows you the evolution of the security of routing since 2019 and up to 2022. Now, in 1 minute, where are we heading? Well, we want to implement MANRS Plus, enabling you to delegate what we're doing and making sure that operators may one day have a MANRS agreement which would bring added value to their services. There's a working group working on this. You are cordially invited to join. But to sum up, the idea is to bring MANRS up to the next level. Here are examples of uses of MANRS to secure traffic, to secure peering, and in terms of value chain security and how much it adds in terms of value for different stakeholders. There's a number of elements that will be developed, but I'll skip over that. And if you want to get involved in this initiative, on screen, you can see useful links and a mailing list you can sign up to. And that will help you contribute to the implementation of MANRS. In terms of opportunities, we offer training. There's training on MANRS. It's free, and it enables you to take over and to become a MANRS champion in your community. And it can help your community go further. There are opportunities of becoming ambassador. So do have a look at it. If you meet the prerequisites, then you could become a MANRS champion or leader in your community. You can also get involved in the technical program, the coordination program, and contribute regardless of your profile and expertise. Last but not least, why join MANRS? Well, to improve security, because this can have a global impact. It's a way to move towards a better future for operators and to make sure that communities improve internet, and in the long term, that your MANRS label, your sort of stamp, could be a reference and a sign that what you're offering is secure. So that's it for my presentation. And in the name of the MANRS team, I would like to thank you for your attention. I think that there are stickers if you're interested in having them, to put them on your laptop and to promote the scheme. I'm sorry if I ran over a bit. I understand your desire to share this information. I hope that those who are online or in the room are going to be able to benefit, and we're going to make sure that we distribute the presentation so that everyone can use them to the best of their possibility. We've had 3 presentations. The first one looked at RPKI, with a focus on resilience of infrastructures. The second one looked at validation, the DNSSEC one in particular. And now is the time to exchange and open the floor to questions, starting with people who are online. And those on site can also consider the questions they may wish to ask. Your turn.
So, any questions online in the chat, maybe? Maybe we can read them out.
You think you could?
So on the Afrinique website, we've only got the English version, but is there a French version? I'm going to give the French version of the presentation to the organizers. Hello, everyone. I'm Niki Zoulad from Côte d'Ivoire. I work on communication regulation. My question is for Yazid. 2 questions, maybe. First one. So the implementation of DNS, we've implemented some things on Côte d'Ivoire. I've checked the status and to check our level of validation. I think we're at 33%. How can we improve this and make that rate evolve? What would you recommend? And my second question, a little more technical, maybe. I'm in charge of the PKI project, a national project in Côte d'Ivoire. We've implemented a platform for electronic signature with the HSM component, which is, for those who might know, is a cryptographic tool that makes the data secure on our signature platform. But in your presentation, from what I gathered, with this notion of public or private key, we could have a link between the use of a HSM and the implementation of DNSSEC. Maybe I have to read up on all of this to understand it better, but as an expert, maybe you have some recommendations on that topic also? Thank you. So it was just to know, how can we add extra layers of security to all of this? Thank you. Okay, thank you very much for these 2 questions. I'm going to start with your first question on the level of the rate of validation. So on the APNIC Labs website, so stats.lab.apnic, when you scroll down, you can see that at present, you've got Atlantic Telecom, who's got a validation rate of 99%. And in the final column, I can see that Orange Côte d'Ivoire is the largest operator there. They're followed by Atlantic Telecom, IFNet, don't know who that is, AFNet. So I worked for several years with the guys at Orange Côte d'Ivoire, and we kind of went in circles. we worked with Neria and then Patricia, I think. And it's thanks to them that I was in touch with the right team. But I really don't know. That's one of the difficulties I think that we face sometimes. People say, "Oh, we'll get back to you," and you keep writing, and no one ever gets back to you. So it's handy if you've already worked with some people. In 2020, thanks to JB, I worked with Orange for the first time. But yeah, it's about having the right person, the right contact. I wrote to JB and I said, "Listen, Orange Burkina is not doing certain things," and within 3 days, it was solved. Because he put me in touch with the right team, and the guys welcomed me, and Orange Cameroon and Orange Maroc, as I was saying. I'm working with Sofricom Tunisia, which is also based in the region and covers quite a few operators, Orange operators for DNS servers. So there are things that we're doing, but obviously there's this little blockage points here and there, and it's about finding them and fixing the system, really. But if we can help, feel free to reach out. For your second question, I think that I covered Abidjan very briefly, but I didn't see Brice at that point. I think I didn't get to see him in September, but Brice did everything he could to not have to provide me with wine last time I was there. But we saw the infrastructure they had in place there, and maybe there were some misunderstandings. If we had understood what was happening when you were deploying the signature, and if we'd understood that a VM, I think you'd explained that the hardware, I can't remember which equipment you were using, but that this hardware had different virtual machines, and that you could play around on the VMs on this to manage the zone signature, then I think, yeah, that's something that's doable. Sometimes people, as soon as you mention PKI, people think, oh, is that in the infrastructure of the PKI that's going to manage the keys for the DNS signature? And that's why people get confused. So we want to tell people not be confused on this. I see that Brice might have something to add. I know that he was at the center of the signature for the zone. Yes, I just wanted to say very briefly, there was a constraint where we had to separate things. We wanted to make sure that there was only one secure point of entry in the whole infrastructure. So we would avoid mixing secure entry points. There's an HSM just for one specific entry. And there's some things that you may not want to use for another infrastructure. You want to keep best practices in place. And it might be worth separating different systems. That's one of the things you need to bear in mind when tackling issues around security. It's a service that's not mandatory, but you really need to try and improve things. So if you have contacts in Orange Côte d'Ivoire, maybe that can help and move the situation ahead. And I'm just going to put the call out there for all participants in different countries like Gabon, or, we can't work alone. And as I said, within a few days, when working hand in hand with other colleagues, we managed to solve problems. I remember in Cameroon when I ran into people who were reticent, they checked with Burkina, and things improved drastically. They saw an increase of the size of memory, and that improved things. So we decided to keep the signatures in the cache, for example. Thank you very much, Yazid. It's a very interesting debate. What we maybe need to do is to have real communication on these different infrastructures, because the global vision of a normal person is that it's something that's quite complex. I went onto ChatGPT, and when I type in DSN, the validation of DSN is a crucial process to ensure security and integrity of DNS data. And it is more and more used nowadays. Where did it tell me that it was difficult to put in place? I saw it. Anyway, I had two questions to ask you. So you said that Congo Telecom and 86%, 86%? How is that? They transfer, is it because they transfer third, or have they deployed DNSSEC internally, externally? I'm not sure. So in 2 words, second question, so in 2 words, what's the state of this issue in Central Africa? So as I showed the validation in Central Africa, I can share my screen again. Am I still in the Zoom call? I hope so. There we go. I'm gonna share my screen again. Voila. So the blue graph shows you the level of validation since 2020 up to April 2023 today. You see the different years at the bottom there. And as I was saying, I arrived ICANN in April 2020, and we started working with certain operators. And what the boom that you see there is what we did in Cameroon in August 2022. So when you check out August, on the 8th of August 2022, we had the DNS for Cameroon. And MTN, on their own, activated that validation. And then you've got Orange Cameroon, who also activated that. And that's where we moved to 40% for the Central Africa region. But if you look at the breakdown per country, you see Chad, 79%. Central African Republic, they're at 100%. Yes, I know, but they're 100% because up on the left here, and you could see Orange Centrafrique, that's 100%, but the other ones are very small networks. They're not dense enough. But it's just to give you an idea, these slides of the density of the network. So they send all of the traffic towards Google. And so that brings me to my next question. Stop sharing. And I'm now going to share my other screen. There we go. So here you can see that the signature is not entirely linked to validation. The signature is the person who manages the domain, be it signed or not. You can still have validation. The operator, the ISP, it is a different thing. You know, is it signed? Is it not signed? As an operator, I don't necessarily need to activate validation. Well, don't you? You've got a lot of users. So you've got .org, .edu, academia, .africa. So you've got all these different domains. As soon as it's signed, you're going to have validation. And if it's not signed, then that might be a different situation. We want to work with the different administrators for the domains and with the ISPs to activate validation. So there's two different complementary elements here, but they're also independent from each other. And finally, for the resolvers, let's see in Africa. So they're talking about, we were talking about Central Africa. Let's see. Where's the Central African Republic? There they are. And you can see they're 1% Google and 92%. So they mainly use Google for 92% of their total validation. So that's validation of DNS resolution. But if we look at Congo, 53% CAS. So 53% within the operator himself. 29% is the resolver. So you can click here and we can see details per operator. And that's where you see for Congo Telecom, because here you can see Congo Telecom. MTN has its own resolve. And then you've also got different columns here for Google, the Cloudflare, different ones out and in the country. So maybe we need to see what's happening in Congo Telecom. There might be the IXP. You've got Airtel also, 43% down here, 39% and 11%. There's a Sky that uses 29%, or OpenDNS, that's a public resolver, it's 58%. They use the 9999. So and that's just different examples and breakdowns of the different operators and how they do all this resolver system. So this is all public data that you can access on the stats.labs.appnec.net. Thank you very much. Yes, thank you. Thank you, everyone. While we're transitioning to our final panel, I think that we're going to open the floor to a coffee break. Jean-Baptiste, are we going to move to the fourth session and final session of the day on tools and best practices?
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Serge, Goma, and all the panelists. It's a pleasure having three organizations who work in different aspects, but hand in hand, Afrinic, ISEC, and ICANN. It was very important exchanges. You have to present things that aren't hidden, they're public, and that we can use to appreciate the state of networks in our countries. And I think we can, from there, decide on which is the best approach. So we've seen quite a few interesting presentations, and here it's not about saying this is a good network, this is a bad network, but here we're just getting a picture of the situation and where we're at, and where things are at in Africa, and see what we can do together to improve things so that they're improved by the time we meet again next time. So I hope everyone's still with us. If there are certain stakeholders that are working on networks, we're here to support you and develop certain elements that mean that next year, when we come to ASEAN, we're at 100% everywhere, and we've improved drastically because we've applied things like we need to do. Thank you very much. Just a little coffee break, free service, so feel free to get up and get a coffee. Our final session will be in several parts. So we've got different presentations. We want to cover different platforms. And we're going to invite the operators to discuss. So we're going to both contribute to the MANRS initiative, but also maybe you can talk about your network in spaces where it needs to be known. Maybe you could find some people who want to do peering with you. They might not visit your website or web page. They're going to go to different platforms, Peering DP, which is a database. You've got different stakeholders who are CDN providers. And they might then work on BGP with you and accept certain routes or certain IP addresses. And they're going to base all their decisions on what you have, what you don't have. So you've got different tools for coordination that we would encourage you to read up on. And I'm going to give you an introduction to the MANRS Observatory and its interface, and maybe you can then have a look at the different rates for each state. So that's the different tools I'm going to be talking about. And in terms of IXPs, before delving into IXPs, we've seen different presentations. We want to see how you can reap the most benefits from an IXP. But before focusing on the world public IXP, you need to focus on different aspects. Don't present traffic per member, but accumulated traffic. You need to have the right information. If you say, okay, we've got 1 mega, it's like, yeah, okay, where? So you need to have the right data. And this can reassure members, operators, if they hesitate to join. Nico showed us this morning how things can evolve with very little traffic from 5 gigas. And if you go onto the Kinix website, you'll see that the Goma traffic and Lubumbashi traffic, and you accumulate all of that, and that gives you a better idea of the traffic that they've managed to generate and collect for Gabon. So I think we also got different evolutions for different traffics for IXPs in South Africa. And a few years ago, not even 10 years ago, they were at 6 gigabytes maybe, and now they're in terabytes. So, and there's an importance of all this. I think Gila will then give us another presentation, an interesting initiative. Are we going to keep these statistics on the screen? There you go. So the first platform that I would invite the operators for infrastructures to use is Peering DB. I checked it this morning. I tried to type in Congo. And I was glad to see that most of the stakeholders in Congo, I don't know all of the operators, but when you see Congo Telecom MTN, GVA, ITM, Standard Telecom, Vodacom, and A6. And for example, if you click once you click onto Congo Telecom, you then see some information, their ASN, their website, all the information that's available, and which exchange point they're available on. So they're in CGIX and Napa Africa. So that gives you an idea of the different locations where traffic comes from and into Congo. So Congo Telecom could gain access one way or the other. And here, Congo Telecom is present in other data centers. So these are public data. You've got one in Congo Telecom. And this is where it's interesting having partners. For a partner who's thinking of working with Congo Telecom, it's not the website that's going to be the most helpful. They're going to check peering DB and see where they present, and then they might check interconnectivity in different data centers or certain IXPs. So Congo Telecom has different peering policies. So it tells you if there's automatic, if there's choice. I think one of the presentations this morning in Gabon had an operator who came to the IXP but had decided to only peer with the government network. That was a selective policy. So it depends on the association's internal regulations. But if it was an association, then maybe we could say that the policy changes depending on your size. If you're quite small, you're trying to peer with everyone. But if you're larger, then maybe you're more selective. For all those who manage internet infrastructure, this is the place to be. This is what we were saying during the MANRS presentation. Yesterday, today, this morning, maybe, Samuel talks about one element and said that there were some countries who have IXPs, and when they go to certain platforms, they just couldn't find them. So I think there's a lack of communication on the presence of IXPs in certain places. I think Tunisia was mentioned. But what I want to say here is that there are organizations, IXPs are organized to magnify the contribution in the global organization of the internet. Here you've got a database that's managed by LOX. And here you want to have a presence, at least for your IXP, to be named and listed, because then you can also add the global traffic generated so that you can then create the link between the volume of traffic that is classified as classic transit and the transit that is brought on by local IXPs. We've discussed this during different conferences organized by the Internet Society, and we've talked about like IXPs versus global transit and traffic, sorry. So you try and measure these different volumes of traffic, see if the sector is evolving, you know, the typical evolution, or should we be focusing on the exchange point? Sometimes, you know, you can wonder, is it worth taking a step back or not? So this helps you. Some people leave and think, oh, it's not needed, and then realize actually it could have been. So this provides useful information for decision making. So, for example, someone could get information about GAB IX and the traffic, where they're at, and things like that. So you've got France IX might tell you about their experience in these platforms. So I think it's very useful. So you can also register on this database. And another difficulty that people often run into, some people think, oh, it's quite difficult. We've talked about capacity building, especially technical skills. We've tried to come up with solutions, but we know that in our world these days, there's automation and technical management, technical tools. So IXP Manager is a solution that you can deploy in your IXP to automate certain tasks for creation of new members with fewer complexities, and then when you have to do it manually. Especially when you take into account a lot of IXPs are associations, so there's not much staff and not everyone's available time-wise, or doesn't have the opportunity to contribute. So this kind of smooths all this out and makes management simpler. There's a community behind all of this, and people who can help you out in your structure, especially if you're facing certain difficulties.
Last but not least, the last point that I wanted to present to you. In Africa, we have an association for African IXPs. It's FIX. And it's the pinnacle of IXPs in Africa. If there's an IXP that's not listed there, it's an issue because it is a source of information. That's where Samir looked this morning. So he won't know, for instance, the Tunisian IXP is not registered there. It's not listed. There's, I think this is the map that he used. If you look at it, the IXPs are listed by countries, by location, and they use different sources. There are different sources. So make sure that you are present in all these key sources of the sector, because this is how people will get to know you, and this is how we'll get an idea of the volume of traffic you handle. Partners may also find you that way, and they might look on these resources, so they need to be able to see you. It's also a good way for you to consider whether one IXP is enough per country. Some countries have just one IXP, others have more. If the management, the governance is not as transparent as it should be, it could maybe lead to creation of parallel association that could take root in another location, or it could be problematic because the first organization had its limits that others can tackle it. So having two IXPs can be interesting. Each time there is a POP with service operators in other regions, if you have, for instance, an POP in Pointe-Noire and one in Brazzaville, it might be interesting. There might be different content. Suppliers have another location where to connect because it enables them to provide better service where everyone is connected in Pointe-Noire. It's a different audience than the one around Brazzaville. It could be relevant to some operators. If you look at South Africa, you can see that there's more than one IXP, even in the same location. It's not a problem. It depends on the maturity of the market and the uses considered. Video, as you know, requires a lot of the capacity. It's more interesting for operators. And it's much better for them to be able to have the resources locally rather than to outsource it at great costs elsewhere. So that's what I wanted to add. Now, for the last element, we'll give the floor to Bilal. We talked about we talked about opportunities to support the IXPs, and I'm reaching out here to community IXPs. If you look on the ISOC website, we've got partnerships for a number of stakeholders, including ICANN and Meta, with whom we've been working at deploying new IXPs in countries where there are none, or to bring support to IXPs that are struggling to function for a number of reasons. So if you look at the website here, you can see you've got a number of opportunities, but the one I wanted to draw your attention was this one. It's opened since March. It's open to all IXPs, more recent and more established ones. You can skim through the conditions, and if the community in which you're based is interested, you can apply. There's a review process. If you look at the website and realize when you're applying that clarification's needed, please don't hesitate to approach myself or Guylain. We'll be able to support you. If your needs are slightly different from what is offered here, again, get in touch with us. Maybe we can find a solution to your specific problem. Maybe we can reroute it to Afrinic, depending on the issue. Maybe we can also direct it to ICANN if they're a better place to address it. So there's a number of stakeholders there to help. So here are a number of online spaces, and I would encourage you to keep an eye on them and check them regularly. That's one example of good practice, but you will also have other examples of good practices online. Guylain has a number of interesting tools to present to you, so he's going to talk to self-assessment tools for IXPs. And this self-assessment is useful to ensure sort of ranking and adequate support to IXPs. Security. Thank you. Thank you, Jean-Baptiste. This afternoon, we wanted to have a sort of lighter session to discuss the small but nonetheless significant elements. This morning, we talked about the IXP self-assessment. As I said, the IXP, the Internet Exchange Point, requires tools, and we have developed about 2 years ago a tool that gives you the means to assess the level of maturity of an IXP in a bid to identify ways for it to develop. For instance, an IXP, a 5-year-old IXP has only got 10 operators connected, how to bring it to 20, how to make it a more significant player in the ecosystem. All these discussions we've had today, all this aims at one focus, creating infrastructures that build up the digital economy. It's not internet for internet's sake only. It's to create platforms which will be a solid basis for digital economy, so that the Netflix and Amazons of the Congo, etc., will be accessible numerically, digitally, sorry. So this tool, at first glance, required sort of breakdown in 3 stages. So the initial stage, this middle ground, and the advanced stage. So starting basic, then developing, then advanced. It was developed in English, sorry for that. The tool was used with SurveyMonkey, a simple questionnaire. And as the person completes the questionnaire, it gives us a better idea as to where the IXP is in terms of development. There are 5 important aspects that are considered. They're all the objective of review. First of all, it's the infrastructure and security. The second one is looking at the services offered. The third point is how many networks are connected. The fourth point is looking at governance. Has the IXP got the means to be sustainable financially? And the fifth point is the community, the role it plays, how engaged it is in its community. I might not go into great detail. The main aim of this assessment is to help IXPs that are at the initial stage to move up, and same for those in the second level, etc. What we've identified is that a number of IXPs are good students if you look at the technical side. In that sense, I mean that they have high scores in terms of technical development. I'm thinking about Kenya, Nap Africa, Uganda. In terms of infrastructures, they're very ahead. What do I mean by that? Well, we're looking at a number of criteria. They've got either single or multiple POP. They've got ports providing high speed. They've established inter-data filtering, so they can filter packets that reach them to ensure that there are no poor quality packets. So maximum security. And we see that a number of IXPs have reached top level. Others are still working towards that goal. And what we see is that for that aspect, a number of IXPs are very good, but they might not be so good when it comes to networks. As you can see on the screen, the IXP for Cairo, for South Africa, for Rwanda, for Serekunda, these 3 main exchange points managed to attract many networks that were assigned to this country. So when Afrinic grants ASNs to Congo, they give 10 of them. But how many of these 10 networks granted to Congo go to the IXP in Congo? And that's a measuring tool for us. And we've spotted that here work needs to be done. Many IXPs completed the 2022 questionnaire. We've not got the data yet for the 2023 questionnaire, but we can see that IXPs don't necessarily attract networks which actually are on their market. When we look at services, well, what are we talking about? Can they open routing servers? Can the IXP offer routing connector services? Can the IXP provide tools to protect from DDoS attacks? Have they got time servers? Have they got virtual private network connection? Is it possible to interconnect two operators on the same network through a different port? Is that automatic? Is there cache? Is there no cache? All this is considered under the heading services. And here the IXPs that are top of the class are Cairo and the Kenyan IXP, South Africa, Rwanda, Gambia, Togo, Uganda. He all had good scores. Angola also scored well. When we move on to governance, a number of IXPs have scored a lot of high scores. When we say good, okay, there are a few points in the red, but there's maybe not so much work to do for these IXPs to bring them to a stage where they have a solid governance model in place. It could be optimal. It's not yet fully sustainable in that they can't necessarily self-fund their operations. They still might rely on external funding, but globally, governance, financial support, marketing operations is showing good performance for a number of IXPs. For the 17 IXPs that completed the survey, that is. So when we collate all this information, we get roughly an idea of where each IXP is located in terms of level. Let's look at an IXP, which is in terms of infrastructure at level 1. You can actually see that it's quite advanced in terms of services. That's the case for Angonix. So Angonix needs to focus its efforts on one particular point, infrastructures, but in terms of services, it's quite well developed. As ISOC, it helps us to plan IXPs that are going to need support. Not only that, but we can also communicate with the IXP and tell them, look, in terms of infrastructure, you need to do more. And that will help them design their action plans so that in the long term, they reach the more mature stage. I'm not going to go into all the fine details, but I wanted you to know that we have this tool for the 2023 survey. Within a week, at the very least, we're going to launch it and we're going to distribute it to IXPs so that IXPs can complete the survey, and we'll see how they have evolved or if some have not progressed at all. Before I move on to a further point, I would like to invite you to ask questions if there are any. If there's no question, I'm going to move to the next point. I think somebody asked me a question during the break. We started full speed because there was no IXP connection. So I had to go back a step, but we need to move forward. So let's come back to what an IXP is. That's the question I was asked, kind of. An IXP within a context of market is part of a network. I used Juniper JP as a source for these slides. It's a website that explains in simple terms what an IXP is. You've got schools, mobile networks, internet service providers, etc., that are interconnected. Okay, there's a question. How do you measure community engagement? Well, generally by using simple questions. First, we ask if there is a community, is it established? We're not going to go as far as asking whether it's legally registered, but we'll ask if there is a community that meet regularly in order to identify whether there is a plan for regular meetings to discuss peering and interconnection. That's how we get a feel for it. We ask other questions, such as whether it has a legal status, it's registered as a community or not. That's what helps us work out whether there is a community and whether it's live, if effective, because it could be a community, but it could be inactive. So that's an IXP. It's networks that are interconnected. I don't want to get into the finer details because I think Samuel covered this at the start. Some networks are typically consumers of content, and some are content providers. Netflix provides content, for instance. GVA is more residential network, so it's using AIBO contacts. So the more diverse an IXP can be, the better. If you have IXPs that only have AIBOs consuming content, it's not very balanced. You also need to have networks that are driving content. It's a bit like the analogy with pipe and water. You need networks that pump up water and some that evacuate water. And in the middle, we're showing a routing server, but it's a consolidation point where everyone gathers and interconnects. That's the basic representation of what an IXP is, if you want to visualize it. If it's not entirely clear for someone visually in the room what an IXP is. I've pulled an image together. Doesn't mean that's what you've got in every IXPs. You've got the front and back of a rack, and it's a deployment that happened recently. It doesn't necessarily mean that it's what you'll find in every IXP, simply that an IXP can fit in one rack. It can fit in one of these, even in half a rack. You might have a couple of servers for basic services provided by an IXP. You can have routers or even just one router. When you start, usually one router is enough. And sometimes you can start an IXP with that server, with that router, just with a switch. That's the very basic configuration. But, you know, the usual would be one router, two servers. It could be Cisco, but it doesn't have to be Cisco ones. Switch can do VLAN, that could be enough. Routers, they don't need to be Cisco's, they could be microchips. You need a switch and a peering switch. And you can use half of your rack for the various networks that are joining you. So XPGVA, Congo Telecom, or there are other markets, other IXPs that decide to leave the half of the rack for networks that connect. They have a separate rack for networks that connect. So it depends also how much space you've got, what you can do. This is a deployment that we implemented recently that we supported. This is Cape Verde's IXP with basic equipment that we put together, but it could be replaced with a microtip type. It could be replaced. This is a Cisco 1000, but we could have used another one. Even Cisco 3750. As long as it can operate VLAN, it's fine. That's. I didn't want you to keep the idea that it was to be complicated. It doesn't need to be complicated or expensive. Sometimes we say that millions of CFA francs are needed, but that infrastructure can be built between $10,000 and $20,000, or it can be even repurposed. So it doesn't need to be very complex or very expensive. A few other important tools to use. Let me share these rapidly with you before I take questions. I'll skim over this quickly, but how do you see the traffic on an IXP? This is the Rwanda IXP. Its name is Rhinex. And it used to peak a bit higher than it does now, but this is how we visualize traffic. Can we maybe see France IX? David? Right. So an IXP really needs to have a website, because that's where you'll show traffic, where you'll display your peering policy that you operate, so that any person interested in joining may come to you with the information it needs. $500 members, and that's the graph I wanted to show you. So it's typical when you go on M6 POPs, you will always get traffic displayed in that way. You also have this part, which is very important. This is at a glance the number of networks, ports, users on the routing servers, and how many suppliers are connected to the IXP. And below you have a graph showing the traffic. We're around 2 tera, the 2.5 tera for the peak. So very important, very significant. Typically, an IXP should always have a website with all these basic information. Jean-Baptiste mentioned an association. That's another point. I'm not going to develop it too much, but in terms of resources, if you need to access presentations, examples of good practices, you can find them here on African IXP Association's resource page. Do you know Hurricane Electric? This is also a very useful tool, which can give you, for instance, a lot of information regarding what is happening in the country. Let's see what's happening in Congo. So for instance, today what we can see from Hurricane Electric, we can see the networks that are visible in Congo. They're on the screen. If you're doing peering DB, you can also access that, or Cloudflare. So that gives you an idea of the AS that are there, what IPs, what visible prefixes there are, etc. I had Congo Telecom in particular. I selected Congo Telecom, and it gives you basic information. What I wanted to draw your attention to, which is important in terms of tools, is this type of model. Hurricane Electric has got a good platform that enables you to really visualize how Congo Telecom is interconnected. Can you move the cursor, for instance, there? If you hover over one of the bubbles, you'll have more information. And it shows you they're using, for instance, Angola cables. This one, for instance, is Cogent Communication. So they use 3 main channels, as you can see. And they're bringing them internet visibility. It's important to show how your operator comes out. The last slide I like to show, which contains a lot of good things. I'm sure you know Felix Smith, or I encourage you to get to know him. He contributes greatly to internet and technology in general. He has a rather interesting website on which he shares many examples of good practices, and that's the focus of this session. You'll see examples of good practices or references for training material, listing what many of you do in the room. You've got, for instance, current training materials, and you can see all the information. It's all in English, but the training on routing, the training on BGP, they're PDFs. They're regularly updated. It's current, latest information. Everything that's design IPv6. You've got information about security, labs, etc. If you've got the lab, that you can use this, for instance. But I wanted to draw your attention to the many presentations available on V6. It's in English, but as Jean-Baptiste was saying, the programming language is always, just to relax things. Slides are in English, but programming language always are in English. So for this website, we're not particularly worried that languages will be a barrier. The instructions are there. When we open a router, Cisco, it's always Cisco, it's never in French. I wanted to draw your attention here on IXP design. He's really provided a detailed how to design an IXP. If you open the PowerPoint, okay, it's taking a while, but you can go and open it. We'll share the link.
So what's an IXP?
Okay.
So I think Safari is not a fan. I think I ran into the same problem previously. So what you can see on these slides is that he explains how to design an IXP, what you need to consider, best practices, and so on and so forth. So I think that's it. Do you have any questions? Anyone online? Do you have any questions? Any questions in the room? There aren't any bad questions. Any question is a good question. So, one final link, you can also go to the Internet Society's website, the learning section. I think ICANN also has that. ISOC has specific training sets around IXPs. It's a class called IXP 2.0. It's self-taught training. So you learn on your own, at your own pace. And what's nice with this course is that it's not too technical. There's some technical aspects, some regulatory aspects, some things around governance, policies, commercial aspects. And so you can always see this and delve into the different options. So there are different questions. What's the economic impact of having a Blackpoint IXP? Why don't the Blackpoint IXPs connect? Is there economic value? There's obviously technical aspects. If people send us information, should this go back? But there's a cost when a package goes 500 kilometers one way and back. That's 1,000 kilometers. There's delay. So this class covers different economic aspects. So I would encourage you to take a look and go through it. If you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Guylain. Thank you for your attention. As we often say, you've been very attentive since this morning. There's some people online who've been following our day with us. It's been a really good day. A lot of sharing, and I think if there aren't any questions online and in the physical room, maybe we could stop there for today to give us maybe a chance to go home and do something else. And I hope to see you tomorrow. I think tomorrow we've got a very interesting program yet again. The first session, today we briefly touched upon governance, but there's an entire panel on governance tomorrow. So governance, policies and regulations, that's session 1. And we will have a speaker from ICANN, another expert from ISOC, and an expert from the region. And so together they're going to tell us about practices and the best practices to put in place to promote peering in IXPs. And so it's presentations, discussions about key governance policies and regulatory aspects aiming at building better peering and interconnection ecosystems. We will also have a second session focused on the development of infrastructures and digital content. So we'll focus on Terraco in South Africa and the fact that they were providers of data centers. So I think maybe this could explain the evolution they saw. But yes, so tomorrow we will have a panelist from the ARPCE who'll tell us about their experience. We've got someone from PAX, so PAIX. And we will hear from various people's experiences, the difficulties they faced, and how we can gauge the impact of data centers in these different systems. And finally, we'll have a final session on measurement. So what's an ID card, in a way, beyond all the traffic that exists? What are the lessons learned? And data, you know, is the black gold. So for people who want to work in the markets, are there certain elements that can help us develop all of this by content and capacity building? Maybe this can help figure out who to buy with. So this would be, for example, peering coordinators, whose job it is to figure out which operator needs to buy with which operator. So we've got BGP path for open telecom. So it's people who try and improve the service for the community. So we're going to talk about all of this tomorrow. I hope I'll see you then. And maybe everyone can come with 1 or 2 extra people to contribute to the discussion. And on behalf of Internet Society, the OZN team, the coordination team, thank you very much to technical support. Thank you to everyone. Thank you to the camera manager who's sat down, lied down, flipped the camera. Thank you for all the support. Thank you to the hostess who helped us pass over the mic and helped us with the coffee breaks and lunch. Thank you very much and see you tomorrow. And thank you very much to all the teams, online, technical and non-technical. Sorry, I didn't mean to forget you. Thank you very much to the interpreters and to all the panelists who have worked with us today. Thank you very much. Have a lovely evening.